The final method we'll look over is observations, and specifically we'll look at something you're familiar with, which was that observation checklist that you used for Make a Presentation. So if we go into that YouTube document, you can see here that we have an actual assessment record, which is the assessment tool that we used. Within that document you can see that it's an instrument because we've got our ability to mark them as satisfactory or not satisfactory. When we double click into there, so this is the assessment tool. We call it here at Evoke the assessment report because it comprises of the assessment plan, all of the mapping, the instruments that make up the full tools, the report on whether they're competent or not competent, and feedback to the candidate and feedback from the candidate back to the assessor. So we choose to roll it all up into one document, and you'll be working with different documents from the RTO that you're working with. All of this will at least be provided to you. So we have our plan there, everything that was negotiated. We have all of the products that had to be submitted, and we'll be able to open up those against our exemplars and as an expert deem them satisfactory or not satisfactory examples of the product. You'll recognise now with observation that this was the observation checklist that you would have filled out, and depending on the opportunity, if there was an opportunity to observe the particular task. If there wasn't an opportunity, then it's fine to tick not applicable, but that really only occurred in this one, I would expect, for any behavioural issues that you couldn't demonstrate that you could manage behaviour, which you can see down here. If applicable, manage inappropriate behaviour. Well, we couldn't see evidence of that because it was such a beautifully well-behaved group. So in that case, we still can see that that was a performance criterion there over several of the units, which we can see from our mapping. So what you would do in that instance is just then ask the candidate a direct question. What would you do in this situation? You would perhaps give them a scenario, or as one of your other pieces of evidence, you've already anticipated that and had a written question to that effect. Because you're the expert in your industry, regardless of what you're observing, so you guys as teachers would be an expert, and it's quite possible to accept your checklists as evidence and take your determinations of satisfactory or not yet satisfactory. Other people won't be teachers, and they'll be observing something like forklifts or how to make a coffee or customer service or whatever the actual training package is. So as experts, you can then determine how many ticks, or you decide as part of your assessor group with the RTO what is a satisfactory response. So here at Evoke, we like 100% ticks in the yes column to make it a satisfactory response, and therefore you would be able to tick satisfactory there. Further on into the tool, you can see then that there's an opportunity to create a result. So after all of the assessment methods have been applied, when you've been able to mark all of those instruments as satisfactory or not satisfactory, you then can come down to make a recording overall for that unit as to whether it's competent or not yet competent. So here on the Evoke tool, we have we actually just train our assessors to highlight it, and select it. You might actually select it as a box. Okay, so that was fine. He was found competent in all areas because all of those boxes were satisfactory, the products were satisfactory, and the questions were satisfactory. So once all of that's collected onto the one report, you would be able to make that type of determination. Now say a candidate, their product was incomplete, or some of the questions were wrong, and you have a standard that 100% satisfaction in all of the questions, 100% in the checklist is the requirement, then you would have to tick not yet competent. And if you're selecting not yet competent, you would have to explain what further evidence is required. Perhaps they have to go back and, in our case, watch a YouTube presentation again and go back and try those questions again. If it's an incorrect question, then you might want to just try some verbal feedback, ring them up on the phone and say, look, I'm just inquiring about question 11. This was what the question was. I noticed that you've actually selected this. It's not actually a satisfactory response. Would you like to have a go if I can send you the YouTube video link again? Have a watch of that, try that question again and just email it back to me. That might be the preferred option, or it might be something that you can try verbally quickly over the phone. But once you have noted then a satisfactory response, you would be able to deem them competent overall when they've met that gap. So it might be that they have to attend to question 11 again, or whatever it is, or resubmit another product. Whatever it is there. And then you would go back once they've resubmitted and you would put the date that they've resubmitted that. And once it's all satisfactory on the second attempt, you could choose it. Now, if they're still not satisfactory, you could just copy and paste and create another row there, because it's an electronic document which allows some flexibility. Now we get back to the feedback. All right, so say they weren't yet competent in the beginning, but then they had reached a competency. You would have put the first feedback in regard to this, and then you would follow up on the next date and provide the feedback. So let's just have a little look at feedback with assessing. I like to think of it like a hamburger. You have a soft, sweet bun on the top, and that's where we're always starting with our positive feedback. Nice and soft and sweet and positive and inviting. Then you get into the meat and the veggies, and this is your constructive phase of your feedback. Now, if they're not yet competent, this is where you would be referring specifically to the performance criterion requirements, the requirements of the unit. And if they are competent, there might still be some suggestions instead that, yes, you're competent, congratulations on that. Just into the future, my recommendation is you continue focusing on X, Y, Z. And, perhaps there's something that you could suggest that they continue to develop, even though everything was satisfactory and therefore competent. Whenever you finish, always finish again with a nice soft sweet bun. We want an overall positive comment. So perhaps they weren't yet competent and you've pointed to the requirements of the unit and what further information's required for evidence, but you would still, finish that feedback on a positive note. Look, although you're not yet competent in this piece of evidence and this piece of evidence, and we've agreed and discussed what you'll submit to me next, overall though it was a very strong submission, and as I said earlier, your strengths are certainly this and that. So just think of the hamburger perhaps as a good way to ease in and always finish on an easier positive note.